The ungovernable part is the part that probably with even any effort on the part of government, they haven't succeeded in coring the confidence and the support of the people to give them any form of support, because people have lost faith in governance. So one led to the other, or vice versa. But most importantly, I also understood, having visited over 32 states in the last 9 months, that there is no understanding of what the Nigerian people are and what they want on the part of people governing them. So governance has been reduced to federal and state capitals mostly, and the other parts are places that are probably indigenous to people in government, their hometowns, local governments, and places they think they owe favors. So that's been my general experience. But interestingly, the Nigerians are very resilient people, and actually have been looking forward to the kind of messaging that we took to them. And I mean, this wasn't just visiting any particular region. I visited every region. I've done all the 6 geopolitical zones, and also visited a lot of cities and towns and villages, been to churches, been to schools, mosques across the country, been to markets. I've actually visited border towns in the country and looked at the condition of our borders. It's amazing.
What did you make of the border situation? Because I remember that you went up north, right to the end. To virtually the end of the country. Yeah. And when we talk about some of the security challenges that we are faced with within the country, people talk about porous borders and so on. What was your experience at those borders?
It would be appropriate to claim that the border is porous if there's a border at all. You know, there is no, I don't even think there are milestones erected anywhere to mark the borders. We just have security agents who have a duty post, and they have a little stick or iron across, and you know, for transactional border businesses. That's what I saw. There is nothing that prevents anybody from coming into Nigeria through Zamfara State, even if you have with you a WMD. That's a weapon of mass destruction. I'm telling you, nobody will stop you. And you can pass through any of the borders and pay the appropriate fees, drive in, do what you have to do, and drive out. So we don't have borders. So it would be an oxymoron to claim that our borders are porous. That would mean that there's a border and that maybe certain places are leaking. We don't have, borderline is that we don't have borders.
Now, let me bring you back down into the country now. And I'm almost apprehensive to ask this question, but I will have to ask nevertheless. You spend a great deal of time outside the country.
That's right.
Because you run an organization that is based in the United States.
Yes.
What do Nigerians in diaspora, as they are called, what do they make of what's happening back at home?
What is most interesting is that the people that are most interested in Nigeria, I think maybe for reasons of nostalgia, Nigerians who are based outside of Nigeria, the Nigerians in the diaspora, and all of them are constantly looking in, constantly watching. Just so that you know, I have access to more information about Nigeria when I'm outside of Nigeria than I am when I'm inside of Nigeria, because I'm constantly looking in. I wake up when people wake up in Nigeria. I go to sleep when they sleep, you know. I have to be engaged with Nigeria. It's partially nostalgia and also this sense of deja vu that, you know, you look in and you have this expectation, but nothing is happening, you know. That's the bad news all the time. But there's a part of you that wants there to be great news coming out of the place, because the diaspora, as you call it, in a lot of ways is second slavery. So you've left Nigeria, it's fantastic, but then you have to work all the time. You don't have a status that's acceptable. When you get a status, you are in circumlocution, you know, and then you grow old there, and yet you don't belong there, and then you start feeling that, you know, I need to go back home, but you can't go back home because home is not receptive. So you are there constantly hoping that things will be all right. So you are traveling between optimism, you know, and absolute depression and dejection.
But some people listening to you will be surprised that you would be saying that, because they say you have it good. You're doing very well.
Yeah. Because there's a level of consciousness that has accompanied my life, and it's deeper than just traveling to the U.S. and trying to dress like them or wear sneakers or go to the movies. I have had kids there, gotten married there. But I understand in depth, having been on that side of the world, and understanding what their own citizens go through, and what we have to go through first to be part and belong in that society. And I know that applies to everybody. And then understand that at the end of the day, it's almost vain. If you're in Nigeria, you own a house, it belongs to you. In the US, it belongs to the bank. You have to pay taxes. At the end of the day, it's almost as if, there's this vacuum inside of you that has been created by living away. Yes, having life the way you want it, but not having the substance you want in life because you're not where your life should be. So you are out of your genetics living abroad. That's the way to describe it.
Okay, now let's come to the politics.
Yes.
Many people would say that the politics has been disappointing, and I'm sure you're one of those. Otherwise, you wouldn't make yourself available to contest for this position. But there are a number of people who ask the question, why start at the very top?
Yes.
Why?
Well, when nations have problems that are created at the very top, you solve them by starting at the very top. I'll give you an example. The best place to be if you're looking for a lucrative job in the UK is a local government executive, because that is the top of their own political delivery. That is where government meets the ordinary people. So, but if you want to make impact, or when nations are looking for people to change their countries, they look for people who are the best to start at the top, because the top is the most important part of a political system. There's no question about it. The president of a country is the most important character in a political environment like ours. So when a country is rotten, you cannot fix it by going to the local government. You go to the presidency and fix it. And you look for men with capacity and character and intellect, intelligence, connection, exposure, and all of the good things that people like that should come with to man that place. What I'm trying to say to you is that, when we want to go to the World Cup where it's most competitive, we send our best 11, right? When you send your second or third 11, you are bound to lose. You don't need to be told after the preliminaries that you're not going to make it very far. So that is why the top is very important to people like us, because we've seen what people do when they get the top right, putting the right people at the top. I have seen it by my exposure. And contrary to what people say, I have never been disengaged from politics. I've just not been playing partisan politics. There's no political development in this country that happened in the last 30 years that I did not partake in. And you know that because we started with channels, as a matter of fact. When channels started, in fact, one of the most important video clip about my youthful participation in politics in 1993 came from channel. And who was the anchorman interviewing Abiola on that day? John Momo, your chairman.
Yes.
So that shows to you.
You were much younger then.
Exactly. I was exactly 22 years old, but also the president of the University of Lagos Student Union. And we played a major role in bringing about the democracy that came about in 1999.
Now, I'm happy you alluded to that, because there are quite a number of people who ask the question, who is this man, Omoyele Sowore? Why is he so controversial? Why is it that people keep talking, about some of the things that happened in the past? And I'm happy you alluded to that, because as president of the University of Lagos Students Union, yes, you were deeply involved in the battle against the military at the time.
Exactly.
And you paid a price for it, which is ultimately what led you to the United States.
Absolutely. I was almost killed. I had my career on the line. I was expelled twice. As you know, I was attacked and injected at the University of Lagos. And I was detained several times by the police, the SSS, and the Army. I mean, at the point, the Air Force, when I did my youth service. So I've been through it all. But the problem is this. We no longer teach history. If we did, some of these issues would not have been difficult for people to understand. So we have a new generation of young people who actually only learning history by 140 characters. And, that don't last enough for people to understand there were guys who were around in 1993.
When there was none of those.
There was none of those. And nobody's teaching that. So there's a huge gap, vacuum, in letting people know even contemporary history so that all the student leaders who fought for June 12 or who fought with Abiola would have been known. Most young people rarely even know Abiola. You have to introduce Abiola to them and say there was an annulment of an election in 1993 that almost led to war in this country. And I think people who removed or expunged history from our educational curriculum knew what they were doing when they were doing it, because they knew that if people learned history, some of them will become so irrelevant, they will be scraping the bottom at this point, because history would have confined them into oblivion.
Now, let me come now specifically to your plan.
Yes.
You're seeking to be president.
That's correct.
So definitely you have a plan.
Absolutely.
Let's take
I
a look
had
at
a plan before
you came out to say you were doing this.
Before I came out, before we became a political party.
Now, let's take a look at some of the key elements of that plan. Yes. I've seen you on one or two other media where you, one of the key things that, for example, has been pointed out that needs to be addressed if Nigeria is to move in the direction so many want it to move is power supply.
That's correct.
How would you tackle that?
So it's got to be a mix of power supply techniques. And technology is our friend in this regard. So we are at a miserable 3,000 megawatts of electricity right now. And this country is in need of at least 24,000 immediately for us to have some kind of grasp around electrical supply. And we're not talking about supply of electricity for people to fall asleep with fan and refrigerators alone. We need industrial supply, industrial level supply of electricity, so that industries can rely on the national or regional grids to have electricity. And one of the areas we want to tap into is solar energy. And we have African examples to follow. If you just do a small research, you find out that people in Morocco have done it so successfully. Egypt just recently generated 17,000 megawatts of electricity that was let into their national grid. It was what I was crying about when they said Nigeria's economy has surpassed that of South Africa, that without electricity, you are deceiving yourself, because you don't even have enough electricity for kids who want to do their homework before they go to bed with. So if we go rapidly, and we tap into gas, and we tap into hydro, we tap into coal. I'm not a big fan of coal, but we have coal, and coal is still 10% of how U.S. is generating electricity. And you do so rapidly.
Probably even more for a country like China.
Yes, and you can get your electricity right. And the moment you get electricity right, your GDP will increase almost immediately and rapidly, and perhaps by a percentage that will surprise economists. So without getting electricity right, you can't even get security right. You can't get education right. You can't get health right. You can't get agriculture right, because imagine that we have electricity and the farmer is somewhere in Benue State, where they call Nigeria the food basket of the nation, and they grow and they can preserve their tomatoes before they get to Lagos, and you don't have the huge post-harvest loss that we have. Or you have vehicles that can be powered by even electricity that can drive them from Benue to Lagos in refrigerated trucks. Things are going to start getting all right. So electricity is major, but it's going to need huge investment, it's going to need commitment, it's going to need focus, and I'm going to be the chief electricity officer of the country, not the Minister of Petroleum, because that's what every president has done. Because petroleum is, of course, a slush fund source revenue. I need a president who really want to do work, something that will produce immediate results, and not the one who wants to have a title or being a minister of petroleum. Be the chief electricity officer of Nigeria, or the chief advocate of Light Up Nigeria, so that every section of this country will not be in darkness at night. You just need to see how bad we feel when you fly into Nigeria at night, and you just see a patch of Lagos dark, and it's all over Nigeria, because sometimes, depending on where you're flying in from, you're entering from Kano, and you're looking down and seeing that this country is in darkness. It's terrible. But so that's why that's a major priority for us. But again, before electricity, we have security, because for us to build infrastructure that will deliver on our electrical promises, we need to have security so that people can work 24/7. It's going to require, people working 24/7, putting all the pieces together, drawing the agenda, and ensuring.
Would you be thinking of state police, for example, now that we're talking about security, given our current challenges?
Oh, you look, when we are talking about state police, it's not the most difficult thing. What I'm interested in is, if you are policing, are you training, are you equipping properly? Whether it is called a state police, in some cases, it's a matter of the uniform they wear. In the US, there are local government police. Every town has its own police department. Every campus has its own police department. But there's something that is common to all of them. The standard of training must be approved by the federal government, and there must be a set of conduct that's acceptable to the government. So that if a state policeman is misbehaving or a state police department is misbehaving, the federal police, which is the FBI in the US, can come in and take over and investigate. So you can't just say you are creating state policemen. You leave it to the governors. They use it to kill their opponents. They don't pay them salaries. You have armed robbers on your hands. But do I support state police? Absolutely. In fact, beyond state police, I want every town to have their own police department. Right now, we are, as a matter of fact, do, because that's what the vigilantes are doing without wearing uniform.
That brings me to the issue of insurgency.
Yes.
Because, it started off in the Northeast, but now we seem to have some low-level insurgency in many other places. You mentioned Zamfara.
Yes.
You've been to Zamfara. There are battles going on there. There's the herdsmen, farmers thing in the North Central region. There's the age-long kidnapping that has been going on, armed robbery, and so on. Given this scenario and the fact that you've established this link between the security and the plans that you have for development and industrialization, then the issue of the security itself, many people have come up with various ideas, about one of which is the state police you've just talked about. But you've talked about it, but you've put a caveat.
Yes.
What other thing would you do?
Well, let me say correctly that insurgency did not start in the Northeast. It actually started in the Niger Delta region. Recently. We're talking between 1999 and now. And so state police is not going to solve insurgency. So what we solve is a holistic security system put in place. For instance, what I would do is to separate policing from the territorial integrity of Nigeria, which is the job of the army. Part of our problem right now is that our soldiers are, doing jobs that are not meant for them. You see them at parties, they're escorting people, escorting smugglers. You have to remove them from that. Let police do internal work. Let the army do the external work. But most importantly, it needs collaboration. It needs equipment. You are not going to defeat Boko Haram by way of the way we are doing it. I give an example, for example, that we use, which is an anathema. You are fighting Boko Haram with open roof vans. In other countries, you fight them with armored personnel carriers, so that the soldiers that are fighting them are not exposed. But we are exposing our soldiers by using Hilux vans. Hilux vans are not even an acceptable way of, local policing anywhere else. So we need equipment. We need to arm and train and equip our Air Force. We need to do for our Navy. We need to do for the Nigerian Army. And we need to pay them properly and motivate them. I have covered this insurgency for so long. In the history of insurgency, low-level insurgency, as we have had with Boko Haram, they usually should not last more than 10 years before they are defeated. The moment they last more than 10 years, you have to review your strategy of engaging and dealing with them. And partially, we're also not having the regional and international cooperation we need. Look at what happened when the Chibok girls were abducted. The US, the UK wanted to come in immediately and help because it took 4 hours for Boko Haram to take the girls to their final destination, and everybody who had a satellite in the space was watching. They wanted to help, but the Nigerian government did not believe that an abduction had taken place. And when they were dilly-dallying, the president thought it was some kind of political conspiracy against his next election. And that robbed us of the time to save those girls and an opportunity to have an international collaboration that would have taken care of them almost immediately, because all they needed to do was to have fired on them lead them to their, and have immediate, collaboration that would have ended it. But what happened to us later? We had to be negotiating with Boko Haram and to pay them ransom. And the more they get ransom, the more you give them the energy and the power to obtain more weapons, recruit more people, and have international link that is now a major problem. They started from Boko Haram, now they've become ISIS, and they have splintered into different groups, and they are competing in terms of tough and deadliness. So these are things that would have been resolved with a kind of leadership that was clairvoyant and understood the needs to nip it in the bud, have the necessary collaborations, training, equipment, and most importantly, as we found out, the corruption in the topmost levels.
That was supposed to be my next. That was where I was going next.
It destroyed our attempt at saving ourselves from Boko Haram and other insurgents, and of course, had criminals around the country. So kidnapping, for example, is supposed to be separated from Boko Haram, because that's the policing work that should have been done. But you imagine somebody is kidnapped from Kaduna, and somebody will drive the person all the way to Warri and hide them, and no policeman on the road will say, somebody looks suspicious, something looks suspicious in your car. Open the car, because the man is sticking out his 500 naira. Before they could say Jack Robinson, they've collected and they've driven their victims away. That is where they are not even actively collaborating in the kidnapping business, as we found out later.
Now, I'm happy, of course, you talk about corruption, and not only is it the big elephant in the room,
yes,
to borrow that expression, it's something that you have been involved in investigation and exposure.
That's right.
Over almost 2 decades.
That's right.
There is a war going on against corruption. It's been going on now for 4 years or more, depending on who you want to believe. Are we getting it right?
No. No, we're not getting it right because we're not fighting a war against corruption. And with due respect, when people want to fight corruption, we shouldn't call it a war, because it's not a task force issue. Yes, it sounds very sexy to say we are fighting a war against corruption because corruption is our biggest problem. What you do is to institutionalize ways of nipping corruption in the bud before they start, and that's why I have, written extensively about it. I follow the money. I followed the money for 12 years through Sahara Reporters, and in some cases followed money from state government houses, federal government houses, guest houses, into where they buy jets with them. These are things that could have been nipped in the bud if we actually put in place things that could have ended the corruption before they happen. Because even in the US, the moment corruption takes place, the cost of recovering process of corruption can be very, very tedious and laborious, legally speaking. Because the people who are corrupt will have access to lawyers, some of the best lawyers, and the lawyers will come and do their job. There's nothing you can do about it. But over here, it's the same thing we needed to do. We should have ensured that people just can't take money away. They introduced laws here that you can't take more than a certain amount of money out of the bank, but that's applicable only to the poor people. When rich people want to take out money out of the bank, they use bullion vans to just drive them out of the treasuries, and they do the counting later. So when you have people have access to your treasury that way, you can fight against corruption. So you now have reduced the anti-corruption war into storekeepers and looters. So we are the people at the store, you people are the looters. But what we found out is that, some people looted the stores during the first era, and the other ones came, repainted the store in the front, they put the security guard there, opened the back for their own people to be looting. That's what they call anti-corruption war. How did they do it? Look at everybody that went to APC. The moment you are in APC, you are sanctified. The moment you're out of APC, suddenly your corruption dossier makes it to the surface. So that tells you there's no war against corruption. And I mean it categorically, because not only have I worked fighting corruption as an individual using the media, new media in particularly, I have also worked closely with the EFCC over the years. With every EFCC chairperson, have somehow worked, even the ones that I disagree with. I've made sure that I had a commitment. I know what happens internally with political interferences, the fact that you can't get anybody prosecuted until you go to the villa, and the villa people said it's okay, or they will supply names of people that should be prosecuted for political reasons, or names that you submit, they say, well, this one is on our side, wait, And all those kind of interferences are not going to help anybody to fight corruption. The other thing is that we are not delivering consequences on corrupt people the way we should. We are not even at all doing, except for political reasons. In the U.S., just over Halliburton bribe alone that happened in Nigeria, the U.S. made several billions. I don't know the exact number of billions, because they were jailing individuals, seizing their assets, and the companies that were involved, they were making them pay hefty fines. That's delivering consequences, so that anybody who wants to do that in the future, and they keep strengthening their legislation,
But we do that here too. I mean, where people are having their houses seized, they're having ships seized, planes, and all of that.
But the fact here is that you can't locate the records of what we are seizing. You only hear that houses have been seized. There was a time they said they would name all the people who they took money back from. Have you ever seen it? No, we don't know. They're just playing with our minds. And that's why I said there's no war against corruption. In the US, even when you are pleading, innocence, or you are pleading guilty, or you have a plea deal with the Justice Department, in this case, the Ministry of Justice, there has to be documentation to say this is what you said, and it can be made available to the public. They might steal it for a while, but they can make it available so that if anybody is looking for documentation about what you seized, what you pleaded, and what you said, it will be available to the public. We don't have that here. That's why I'm telling you that it's a joke.
What would you do differently?
Of course. It's going to be 3 layers. First is that we will use technology to ensure that so many of the things we are still hard coding now will be digitalized, including contracting system. For example, I will put all the forms, every form that is signed by a public official in Nigeria through the Code of Conduct Bureau should be available and accessible to the public, including mine. I will do everything to do that. Everybody that's on the CAC, you should be able to search who has companies in the country, so that when a contract is awarded to somebody and he has a 9-year-old boy on the board of their company, you can find out immediately. If somebody is declaring an asset he doesn't have, when you can download them, you understand that, okay, but you are not the owner of this house. Maybe you are planning to buy it in the future, and raise an alarm. Of course, I also strengthen the whistleblowing policy. I have to give it to whomever dreamt the idea. It's a good idea. It's always been around, that you encourage people with conscience within all these institutions, whether private or public, to whistleblow, reveal if they have seen anything that is unusual. Also ensure that we keep an eye on our NFIU, the Financial Intelligence Units of the country, because every time there is a transaction that is past a certain amount, there must be a suspicious transaction report sent out. It's happening, it's supposed to be happening here, but nobody is doing anything about it. All because there's no money that moves without paper trail. Even physical money, especially in our banking system, especially now that we have a cashless kind of system in place, but nobody's monitoring that. Transparency is the solution to a lot of our corruption. When you're transparent about the contracting system, who's our contractor, how much we are earning, how much we are spending, 30% is taken care of. Another 30% is enforcement. I would say another 40% is delivering consequences, crime and punishment. That is what every other country has done around the world to make sure that the yam ban is safe from goats.
Well, but there are those who would argue, and I want to use the same analogy you've just used now, that for as long as the majority of the goats are hungry, and they have no alternative means of feeding, their entire effort will be devoted to accessing the ban. That's so. In other words, you need to ensure that the basics that usually propel many people towards considering corruption are removed.
Absolutely.
So that it is only those who are really determined that will head in that direction.
I'll tell you why, and why that is correct and what we're doing. One of the proposals I have is a minimum wage that matches up with the living wage. You have, civil servants in this country who are earning 18,000 naira per month. That is
When they get paid.
That's if they get paid at all. That's the receipt for stealing right there. So if I'm working in a government office 8 to 2 p.m. and I'm earning 18,000 naira, and you bring something for me to do, what do you think I would do is, first of all, to ask for what you have for me. Because I know that I may not get paid, or even if I get paid, the salary will not take me home. And I'm looking at the senator who probably did not even have a certificate, who never been to school, or who forged a certificate, who's earning 13.7 million naira as allowances per month. And if I work at 18,000 naira per month for 37 years, I still will not make what the senator is making in a month. Why do you think I will not be corrupt? Yes, it incentivizes corruption, especially in a society where there are no consequences for it. So what we propose to do is to pay workers 100,000 naira minimum wage, so that at least they have something that can take them home, that can support their families, health care, and all of the little things they want to do. So if you ask them to go do work, they'll do it, and they see that there are consequences. They don't want to look in the direction of the yam ban, because the yam ban in this time is well protected. It's in a digital enclosure that's supposed to be left to the goats. So if a goat is going to the yam ban, first it will be detected because, it's transparent process.
Goats.
Yes.
Other goats also will be watching.
No, now we are going to not be using goats to man the yam ban. We will use Alsatian dogs that don't eat yam to get the goats not to be close to it. That is what I mean by enforcement.
Now, you mentioned it a little earlier on, but it's a very big problem.
Yes.
Currently, our major revenue earner is oil.
Yes.
And virtually every aspect of it comes from the Niger Delta, where you're from.
Yes, right.
You grew up there, so you're not talking about it from the outside.
Absolutely.
Many people applauded when in 2009, President Yar'Adua introduced the amnesty program after some of the younger elements in the Niger Delta had taken up arms against the government and were damaging infrastructure.
Yeah.
But since then, it seems as if there has been retrogression because some of those militants have returned to the creeks because they allege that quite a number of the promises that were made, which made them drop the arms, were not fulfilled. I know you've traveled extensively in the Niger Delta, even in the last 9 months as well. What's going on there?
Well, nothing changed. What it did is the same way Nigeria reacts to every problem. I mean, the fire brigade approach, as we call it. There's fire, you bring the fire engine, it takes it down, and then you leave. You don't leave the engine behind in case there's another fire, and you don't take care of the source of the fire, which happened from the last time. So what they did was they took a lot of money, gave it to the militants, and took a lot for themselves. And actually, at the beginning, they were sending militants abroad to learn to be pilots and to be welders. But when the militants, some of them came back. Some of them were abandoned abroad. They never took care of them because I had to do a lot of reporting on it. Some of them came back and didn't find the jobs that they expected to do. What normally we should have done is everything that we train them for is to replicate that institution in Niger Delta region, and invest in infrastructure in the area. Look at Niger Delta, they couldn't even complete the East-West highway till today. It's still in a dilapidated condition. They haven't been able to find jobs for so many of the militants. By the way, a lot of the militants are earning more money than even university professors, even till tomorrow. An average militant in Nigeria who is registered as in the amnesty program is earning about 135,000 naira per month. But because they have nothing to do, mostly I do, they find it, very, very attractive to go back to what they used to do because that 135,000 naira is not enough to satisfy their needs. A lot of them have grown pretty much very big, and they have a lot of habits that needs to be funded, and that funding is beyond what the federal government is giving to them, which is a token. So it's more lucrative to go back and split up and break up pipelines and engage
do bunkering,
piracy,
refineries,
and all kinds of things like that. So a clairvoyant leadership would have institutionalized a lot of the institutions that we send them, develop the infrastructure in the area, start to think progressively about the future, because my worry, and which I tell the Niger Delta people when I see them, my people, is that the lifespan of oil it's another 20 years maximum, because Japanese cars are no longer going to be using gasoline. You know, America has already found oil through technology, shale technologies all over the place. And in fact, there was a time the U.S. wasn't buying
Nigerian oil.
Gasoline, from oil, crude oil from us, because they had figured out how to get it elsewhere, and they're even exploring their own country. So be very careful not to rely too much on oil, because what if nobody's buying the oil, and are you going to be drinking it?
No, we have a situation now where from time to time you hear that the cargoes that of Nigerian oil on the sea are awaiting buyers.
Yes.
So already there's indication that there seems to be...
So we need to have diversified before now. But let me tell you, the investment we need to make is not in oil. It's to train people to be part of a knowledge economy that is coming, and this technology. You know, if I was in charge of Amnesty, I'll be training people to become coders. You know, I'll be training them to build computers, you know, and do things that they can, so that they can compete in the future with knowledge economy that is coming. That's what China did, that's what the US is doing. But we're not doing any of that because most of our leaders are not interested. And in some cases, to be fair to them, they are not knowledgeable enough about what is operating internationally on the world stage for them to understand that the investment we need to make on how to diversify our economy is not to be relying on, you know, sales of cargo. You know, because also the militants have figured out how to sell crude oil themselves, and they have people who are all over the Gulf of Guinea waiting to buy oil in whatever quantity they can find that are not regulated. That's why Nigeria at the time was crying that they want their oil to be somehow have a signature on it so that
they can differentiate the one that's been...
Well, who cares about that? It's not diamond, it's not gold. People can find crude oil, they'll buy it and go and refine somewhere, as long as there are no rules governing how you buy and sell. And nobody is going to waste their time helping you to man your borders if you can't do it yourself. So this is where leadership is important. And I mean, clairvoyant, forward-thinking, futuristic governance or leadership is needed for the country. The investment we needed to make in Niger Delta was in education, you know, so that people are prepared enough, so that it's so well that they can compete in the future. As things stand today, it's a matter of time before militancy returns. Full scale. Already it has returned, of course. They no longer report it as they used to report, but they're still, you know, people are still blowing up pipelines, and they're still doing, I mean, piracy is still, you know, going on massively in the Niger Delta. Oil bunkering is going on, of course, with official support. So a lot of overhaul needs to be done, but the real investment needs to be investing the resources of Niger Delta in the people of Niger Delta. But, you know, as I mentioned, the knowledge-based economy in the future also will recognize that the next Niger Delta might be the northern part of Nigeria if we put solar farms there.
Yeah, because it will be protected.
Exactly. It will be the next Niger Delta region because energy will be the new source of, will be the new oil. So it's a lot of things that our eyes should be open to, but we are led by leaders that are tone deaf and are blind bats. Sadly.
Now, there are those who listen to you now and have listened to you and say, these are good ideas, great ideas, and that it seems as if in this 2018-2019 circle, much younger politicians, if you agree to be called a politician, have come onto the scene.
Yes.
But that you needed to bandy together in order to present a formidable front against the already established forces. In this case, if, for example, if we take the current political scenario, you have the behemoths, what you might call the Goliaths, in the APC and the PDP.
Yes.
But then you also have parties like the AAC, the ANN, the ACPN, the YPP, and so on. But that individually, it would be easier for these Goliaths to pick you guys off one by one. But that if you came together, and I think partly in recognition of that, there was something called pact that happened. But it ended in mutual recriminations. And it made a lot of people unhappy, including some of those who participated. I know I've spoken to Mrs. Ezekwesili. She wasn't happy about it. That was Fela, even though at the end of the day, he was the candidate. But why is it so difficult? Because it seems as if you're repeating the errors that the older ones repeated, you know, in not being able to forge a common front and take each person's signature idea, put it together in a general idea, and then sell it to the people.
So I will say that I actually did try to participate in PACT. And I went there, the first day I got there, I discovered that we're different. And that's the truth. Different from this guy. And I think it's based on experience. And I looked at it and said, you know, these guys are my age mates. But they are doing politics the same way the old people are doing it. For example, first day of PACT, the guys that came and claimed to be presidential aspirants were actually recruited to come and, you know, pad the place by some of the candidates. And they started, and I went just for one day and I told them, what we need to do, go to all the political parties that you are part of. Go and become candidates. And when you become candidates, we come back and discuss amongst ourselves, put all these ideas together. They said no, that the aspirants must be the ones voting for people who will become candidates. I told them it won't work, you know, and I left. So the others,
never returned.
I never returned. The others continued, even signed agreements among themselves. And the person who won was congratulated according to what I heard. But the person who lost, who was Kingsley, they didn't like the idea that he wasn't the one who won, because Kingsley had expected that he would be the one who would win this. I think he was given assurances by even other members of PACT. So if I wasn't part of it, I can't blame myself on what happened. But what I've done is to marshal out my plans. So you're using the Goliath and the David, you know, example, analogy. There's only one David, and there's only one Goliath. You know, even the APC and the PDP, as you call them, they are not two Goliaths. They are the same persons with just different nomenclatures. One left hand, the other one right hand. One body, same ideology, same behavior, same demeanor. So the David we need is just one person who also has a signature of every oppressed person in this country, who understood them, who understand what their aspirations are, to confront the Goliaths. And we have done so well after we left, after leaving the meeting of PACT. You know, I have been engaging with them. I even, at a point, took Fela to meet Professor Omoyele Sowore. You know, what I wanted to show to them is how open-minded I am, but I cannot compromise on principles. And the principles are that, you know, I know all the problems, I know who we need to fight, and so many of them are reluctant. In fact, one of them did say at the meeting that they were having meetings with elders, and the elders are kind of icky, or iffy, if you like to say it, that they want a young person who is not too rough. And I knew they were referring to me. So I knew from that moment that distinctively we are moving in different directions. So I had my suspicion that some of them are actually not there to run for office. They're showing up their hands in case there are positions are available for them. They don't want to rock the boat. I want to rock this boat.
Why do people, why does that come out sometimes? People saying, you know, they don't want, you know, the rough. What does that mean?
Because people
it's not the first time I've heard you use that description.
They are satisfied with the status quo ante, and they want some kind of transition that will not be turbulent. Because a lot of people who destroyed Nigeria want to keep maintaining their positions of comfort. And anybody that will come and change that would upset the apple cart, as they say, is somebody they don't want. And they don't hide it, you know. Even amongst themselves, they couldn't tolerate the likes of Abiola in the 90s. So the people who were around in the 90s during Abiola's time are the ones who are still around. The military generals, though now retired, are the ones who are still around. It was the Obasanjo's, Babangida's, the Abubakars, who are still, you know, overseeing the transition process. And these people don't want any fundamental change that is revolutionary in nature. And they don't hide it. It is the reason why, when they had to choose people to do the debate, they made sure that the one who was too rough was left out of the debating process. But they knew that if the debate included me, there will be conversations there that would change the thinking of a lot of Nigerians. And they don't want that to happen, because anything that can open up this asylum in which they have kept our people, you know, this prison, open prison, they don't want it. They want to keep everybody where they are, you know, so that They can keep accepting 5,000 naira on election day, vote for them, vote for their children, and, you know, everybody's okay, even if they're not happy. That is something that is unacceptable to me, and I've demonstrated since 1989 when I walked into the University of Lagos, openly and publicly, that I would not be part of that. And they are very clear, having looked at my history, my pedigree, that I'm possibly not the kind of candidate that they are comfortable with.
Omoyele Sowore, thank you so much for speaking with us.